Okay, so it is my privilege to welcome Carmen Ramirez as our presenter today. Carmen is the assistant to the bishop for the ELCIC, working in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's a role that she started in August of 2022. Carmen is also a PhD candidate in practical theology, and since 2012, she has been working with PHIL, which is the Forum for Intercultural Leadership and Learning. She's been working with the United Church since 2016 in their racial justice workshops as a facilitator. And she has more to say about herself as she gets started. So Carmen, thank you so much for being here and for leading us today. And I'll leave things to you.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. So first of all, I just wanted to thank Bishop Jason and the Manitoba Northwestern Ontario Synod for this invitation. I consider it to be an honor to be here. So I'm going to share screen so we can start. Yes, good. Okay. So as Bishop Jason was saying, my name is Carmen Ramirez, and I'm the Assistant to Bishop in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I was born in Peru, a place called Callao. It's the port of Lima. It's famous for its food and music and people who enjoy life. So I came to Canada at the age of 5, and I consider myself to be an Afro-Latina. I am mixed racially. So before we begin, this is our topic for today, but before we begin, I would like to cover some other things. First, we're going to look at some history about African descendants in the Americas. It's going to be very quick because I'm going to cover 400 years or so, maybe more, in a few minutes, so it's going to make your head spin. It is important to know the past, of course, before we move towards the future. So we need to know what's happened and what has been happening. Number 2, our focus is in Canada because we are in Canada and we're not in the US, as you may know. We do have a different history, and African descendants have a different experience here in Canada. And 3, finally, we will look at how we can be active in racial justice work as ELCIC members or as people of faith. So a quick history. We know that the majority of Black peoples were brought unwillingly across the Americas as slaves. And we also know that some came voluntarily and some others helped the slave owners. Upon their arrival, there was a cultural change, not only for the African descendants, but also for the European descendants and the indigenous peoples who were already in the Americas. And I will come back to this later. One of the ways to look at the experiences of the African descendants is through the development of their music and what they ultimately sang about. For example, in Latin America, until today, and myself included, we dance to the salsa song of Joe Arroyo, who sings about an African slave who arrived and thought he would be a slave forever, having very little hope, or how the slave owner beat his negra, his Black woman. This is what ultimately made him bold enough to stand up for himself and his wife. We also dance to the songs of El Gran Combo of Puerto Rico, who sing about the coal man who is married, and even though they are as dark as car tires, have thick lips and large noses, and consider themselves to be ugly, they have much love for one another and were blessed to have many Black children. As we move to North America, there is music like the spirituals, blues, and jazz. Specifically, Billie Holiday's A Strange Fruit stands out. It says, "Southern trees bear a strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees." Yes, their experiences were different, but one thing they all knew across the Americas is that it was better to be white, and the lighter you were, the better it was. There was a need to be rid of the defect of being Black. It is well documented that it was also possible to purchase whiteness, called gracias al sacar, thank you for taking out, which originated in Cuba, but was also documented in Mexico, Nicaragua, Peru, Argentina, and Puerto Rico, mostly available to those who were mixed race. If you were too Black, then it was not possible to hide your Blackness. So what was purchasing of whiteness for? You could study at a university and live a normal life reserved for whites only, like marrying the woman you wanted to marry, or becoming a lawyer or a doctor, a surgeon, or a pharmacist. If you were white, you could also wear fine clothes, gold, silk, and pearls. There was also another way that people could be whitened. An example is how Puerto Rican government, together with the Institute for Puerto Rican Culture, have portrayed a white Puerto Rico. They have successfully convinced the Puerto Rican population to reject Blackness. Puerto Rico has narrowed down the total of their dark-skinned Afro-descendants to 300 in the town of San Anton. This is all done para mejorar la raza, which means to better our race, an all too familiar saying in Latin America. One I have heard many times. I understand that the world is using white standards of beauty. I remember when I was 11 years old and went to visit Peru for the first time after migrating to Canada. My cousins would say, so you're going to marry a white man with blue eyes, para mejorar la raza, to better the race. As we move forward, further north, in the United States, it is known that slavery lasted for 400 years, but has since restructured its slavery into different forms, as per many African American scholars. Some examples are the inability to acquire land or loans for purchasing homes, being jailed for minimal crimes, or having extensive jail sentences. Things began to change when Black became beautiful. Some examples are more positive: TV shows and movie portraying Black families in a more positive image, Black athletes, Black music, and the new rich Black people. But still, we have a long, long, long journey ahead. We know this as we witnessed the death of George Floyd in 2020, a death that shook the world and especially Canada. But the reality is that many Black men have been killed by police prior to George Floyd and continue to be killed today. There's a list of 229 African Americans killed by police since George Floyd. This was published in Newsweek in 2021 on the anniversary of his murder. This is a very, very sad situation. But now let's turn to Afro-Canadians and Canada's not so innocent past. The first Afro-descendant registered was Olivier Lejeune, who, at the age of 6, was brought to New France and died at approximately the age of 30 in 1654. A full-blown slave system did not evolve in Canada as in the US. There was no economic base in Canada. Slavery was not profitable. It was legal, but not fully practiced. Therefore, there was a limited number of Afro-descendants brought to Canada. Still, Canada needed to govern the Blacks that were here, so the Code Noir was borrowed from the West Indies. The Code Noir regulated the 1,132 slaves that lived in New France. So what was the participation of the church? Most Protestant churches argued the predestination perspective to explain the acceptance of slavery. They considered it to be a positive good. The Catholic Church supported slavery if it survived, but since it did not, then it became irrelevant. Eventually, some of the churches began to speak against slavery. The Baptist churches were the first to speak against slavery in the 1830s. In 1851, the Synod of the Presbyterian Church concluded that the slaveholding was inhumane, unjust, and dishonoring of all Christians. The Congregational Union of Canada condemned slavery in 1846, and in 1853 asked for aid to be extended to fugitive slaves. Across Canada, there were diverse waves of African descendants who had different experience based on their location. Unfortunately, we're not able to discuss this, but instead we will focus on the current struggles. So the roads to progress have been quite closed for a very long time and are still not completely open today. One only needs to look at who has the top government jobs, the CEOs, staff and denominations, and the wealthy in Canada. Racism and discrimination close many doors for BIPOC people. Tokenism and the glass ceiling are common in Canada. This means that some Afro-Canadians get hired while others just reach certain levels once they hit that glass ceiling. Even tracking occurs here in Canada. I experienced tracking personally while entering high school. I was automatically placed in a general course class so that I would only be able to attend college and not university. Well, you may say that was a long time ago. Yes, maybe about 400 years ago it happened. But more recently, I was doing my master's degree and I got a letter in my email saying, I know that you will be very happy to know that you do not have to write a thesis for this degree, as it is a very difficult task. Now, I did give them the benefit of the doubt. I shared it with my DUIM people, which is the people from Deepening Understanding and Intercultural Ministries. We were in a course together during that week. Then it became clear. I transferred to another school and I got to write my thesis. I'm not one to quit so quickly. Also in Canada, many Afro-descendants are paid less, or hold jobs that pay less, or are not chosen for managerial positions. There is a continued struggle for economic resources by most BIPOC people. The racism in Canada is more subtle and hidden. After all, we are friendly and good, well-meaning people. We are not like people in the US. Yet, racial profiling is a common practice within the police force. Specifically, I can mention Toronto. There are many articles in the newspapers of Black men who have testified of being stopped by police for no apparent reason. There is even an article about the police chief who was racially profiled on the day of his swearing-in ceremony in 2015. And there's also a number of Afro-Canadians killed by police, and even more Indigenous people. Oh, Canada. So let's recap and tie all this history together. African descendants have experienced oppression, discrimination, and invisibility issues. I will call this anti-Blackness. This anti-Blackness is so impregnated in all of us, even as young children. An example was in the late 1930s, 1940s. Psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark did an experiment with Black and white dolls where they would allow small girls to choose which doll they wanted to play with. Almost always, Black girls chose the white doll. When they were asked why they chose the white doll, their response was, the white doll seems nicer and prettier with better coloring. A few years ago, there was a video that was circulating on Facebook. They were asking today's children which doll they liked more, the black doll or the white doll. And the children were mixed races. Most children chose the white doll. Some said the black doll was bad, but most said it was ugly. Those are the thoughts of both children from yesterday and children of today. But like many children, adults are also affected. In many Black families, there is an effect of colorism, where the lighter child is treated better. Some adults will even believe that their lighter children are smarter. Now, I had this experience where I was the darker child. In the community, though, I would be favored for my lighter skin. The experience is that the darker you are, the more likely you will be rejected more often. Perhaps I've only been able to touch the tip of the iceberg. But with my experience, I've been able to come up with some suggestions that could hopefully help us all. So where do we go from here? How can we, as people of faith, be active in anti-racism work? And this was my proposal for the ELCIC. So let's take a look at this now. Possibilities and timeline as assistant to the bishop in diversity, equity, and inclusion. The DEI website, which is already ready. I'm going to be giving you the link. It's just not live yet, but some of the resources, even today's resources that I used for the history, are on there. I was hoping to do a Facebook account, but I also have a Facebook account for Phil, and it's called Phil Honoring Black Lives, which people can see articles and have discussions on Facebook. There, I was hoping that to have the contextualized DYM Synod, for the Synod, to include the recommendations of the three task forces by April 2023. But the good news is that there will be one in Hamilton in March 2023. And as far as I know, there are only 2 spots left. And we have 3 Lutherans signed up. So that's a good thing. We also have contextualized racial justice workshops. I was hoping for them to start by April. So we've already had February 11th, we had the pilot, and March 3rd, it will be presented to the NCC. So I'm gonna take a look at what the workshops are about in a few minutes, so you'll get to understand them a little bit more. Session 1 is the one that I have ready. Then hopefully a little bit later on, a workshop focused on 2SLGBTQIA+ for September, and hopefully an accessibility focused workshop for November 2023. So a little bit about what the DYM is, and it's called Deepening Understanding for Intercultural Ministries. There will be a cost sharing, so whoever participates is not on their own in having to pay the full amount. While grants from member churches have decreased, several have instead offered program bursaries. So Phil also has a bursary fund for participants from marginalized communities. So this is more or less what we'd like the typical cost sharing to be: denominational grant, 500 to 1,000, and participants pay something, 300 to 600 from their own resources, including continuing education funds. And the balance can be varied from perhaps a synod or perhaps their local church. So the actual DUIM is a residential 5-day program. This is what the cost would be, more or less, and is from Monday through to Friday. It includes 5 lunches, 4 suppers, 4 breakfast, snacks, 4 nights accommodation. It includes also course materials, 2 facilitators, an intercultural mentor, 2 workshop resource people. So we bring in people, depending on what the topics are, to come in and give a small workshop. Post-program support and connection with field resources and networks. So afterward, all the alumni, we have like a meeting, and there's also we get together. There's also, we build up a network. So it begins to, we have other people that we can go to for support. There's also a non-residential program, which is cheaper. It is 5 days as well, and lunches and everything else are included, same thing except for the overnight stay. But like I said before, we do recommend the 5-day residential program just because it's a time of building and community, and you sort of get to walk with, in this journey, you walk with the people that you're doing the program with. And there's time also in the evenings to meet with people and to have conversations. And we also have 2 activities during the evening. Sometimes we will have, let's say, my husband has been one of the resources to come in, and he teaches us how to dance salsa. So it's just things like that, you know, fun things that you can build community with others. So a little bit more about the program. It moves through several content and conversation phases over the 5 days. So here it is: theoretical, theories and models of culture, how culture operates, and definitions through a faith lens. Application, historical shaping of cultures in Canada, power, privilege, social location, application of models of culture to our cultures, to church denominations, to local community, and to self. Practical, like I was saying, we have resource people on how culture shapes specific areas of ministry and faith, such as theology, pastoral care, worship, music, homiletics, etc. Tools for engaging your community in intercultural ministry. Practice, we have group projects and presentations. Practice how to engage course content in participant context using the area of ministry, work as a case study. And there's always a takeaway in these programs. So we do self-care, of course, because we need to take care of ourselves as we do this work, and support, resources, next steps, commitments, connecting with program alumni for ongoing support and development. So it's like a community of alumni. The content is engaged through a variety of approaches, all of which model help participants practice engaging the content with the community in their ministry setting. And this is all that it includes, establishing an intentional learning community during the program to draw on experience and knowledge of the participants. So we worship in a variety shaped by cultures. So every day in the morning as we come in, we will do a worship, and it can be from a different country, it can be from a different continent. An intercultural mentor accompanies the program and provides daily observations and reflections. So I have been an intercultural mentor many times for the program. So what does an intercultural mentor do? Participates fully in the program, and at the end of the day, I will come in and say perhaps what hasn't been said or what hasn't been discussed, because sometimes, people don't want to say, they don't want to offend anyone. The intercultural mentor comes in and says it, and then we begin the conversation, or it's just for people to think about a different perspective is given. Resource people for examples of practical engagement. We have had a person come in to do culture and theology. And sometimes we've had someone come in and talk about counseling. So it's just, we have different resource people come in depending on what is needed from the group and where the location of the group who are coming together for the program are. Several content facilitators, a variety of hands-on approaches to the content and engage participants as resources, including self-reflection, group work, guest speakers, resource people, physical arts, worship, case studies, and reading. Practicing models and activities that can be used in ministry settings. The ecumenical program allows practice, engaging content across difference. Program content applicable to ministry across difference, including but not limited to culture. So, remember when I said I was going to get back to you on about something? Here it is. Upon their arrival, there was a cultural change, not only for the African descendants, but also for the European descendants and the indigenous peoples who were already in the Americas. I want to add everyone else that has migrated to Canada, because we are all here all together. So I will take you back, again, just briefly, with Christopher Columbus, who came in 1492, reached the Caribbean and the rest of the Americas. His expeditions, and I quote, set in motion the widespread transfer of people, plants, animals, diseases, and cultures that greatly affected nearly every society on the planet. This continues today. And this is why I've put up this intercultural graph, which I borrowed from the DYM. This is what being intercultural could mean and what happens to all of us that live in Canada, whether we are in a rural or urban setting. What surrounds us are changes. Sorry. Changes that occur because we are all immigrants, except for the indigenous peoples who were already here. My point is here that we change one way or another because we are impacted by those around us who have come from different places. So it could be something basic, like eating habits. We now have available to us international cuisine. So one day we can have Chinese food, and another day we can eat Mexican food, etc. Diverse foods. Or it could be something that is not so readily visible, like perhaps language. So I just wanted to give you an example. So hopefully you can understand, or hopefully I'm explaining myself properly. I was a pastor for like 5 years, and there were members of diverse Latin American countries, right? So like I said before, I was born in Peru, and there was a group of Venezuelans that came to the church. So they said gauchos, and I say llantas for tires. So tires of a car, we call it llantas, and they call it gauchos. When I began to, after being around the Venezuelans, and I began to speak to them, I automatically changed the word to gauchos. When did this happen? I don't know, but it did. And it was just by being around diverse people from different countries. Learning occurs whether we want to or not. We are all influenced by our environment and who is living in it. The dynamics change when others join us. So this is what this graph means, is that if you look at it, let's say that the red square is someone from Italy, the yellow square is someone from Mexico, etc. So all of them are different. But this is what beloved community is that we each influence one another, but we each respect one another's cultures and who we are, what we are. So I just want to continue. That was just a side note from before. I wanted to explain that. The racial justice workshops. So let's go here. First, 2 workshops will be separate for BIPOC and the white folks. The first 2, awareness and knowledge. Awareness covers common language, self-identity, history of racism in Canada in the ELCIC. Number 2, knowledge, terminology, doctrine of discovery, markers of white supremacy culture, and there are different videos about these different topics. Number 3, social awareness, equality versus equity, power, scope of empire. And then again, the racial justice workshops will also have an action piece, which is the last session. We look at appreciative inquiry, SMART goals, markers of white supremacy culture. And the appreciative inquiry is sort of like a way to resolve any tension within the church. SMART goals is the way to do it. So these are very good workshops that have been given in the United Church of Canada. And what I am doing is sort of like making them more contextual to the ELCIC. So what is the goal for the ELCIC? A more united ELCIC. How that we have common goals in diversity, equity, and inclusion. The local churches feel closer to the head office. Renewed faith. Unlearn to relearn. Awareness. Changes and common language. Moving towards, and these are things that we need to figure out as ELCIC members. Are we moving towards a beloved community, kingdom, intercultural church? Are we moving towards an anti-racist church? So we need to figure this out as ELCIC members. I cannot do this alone. It requires all of us to work together to be able to do this. So where can you go from here? How can a person of faith be active in racial justice work? I'm going to finish with this. We cannot eliminate racism as individual races. We need to be able to unite together against racism. It can be organizing activities together or separately. All peoples must be active in racial justice work. So I'm going to hand it over to Bishop Jason.
Second, one of the things that came up in the presentation of Carmen's was, who do we want to be as a church? What are our goals and that sort of thing? So as we're discussing, what do we do? How do we get to where we're going? I think it might be worthwhile talking about, what's our goal in the end? And so these ones, right? Our goals as the ELCIC, especially moving towards, are we moving towards a beloved community, a kingdom, an intercultural church, an anti-racist church, those kinds of things. So what I'd like to do is break everyone up into smaller groups to be able to discuss this and think about that question, right? Let's fast forward 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. What kind of church do we hope that our ELCIC will be? Especially with respect to anti-racism work or inclusion work and that sort of thing. So I'm going to set up some breakout rooms here, and I'm just going to hang on a sec, make a couple of things here. I'm going to give us 15 minutes. I think that'll be enough time to discuss things fairly well. And I'd love to hear some of your feedback afterwards of what your groups kind of come up with or where you think we are headed as the church. So I'm going to open up those rooms and we'll see you in 15 minutes. Okay, Carmen, back to you.
So just before I give you that last question to sort of answer, I wanted to let you know that the FIL program, the DUIM, has been in the San Soto Center near Winnipeg, and we've been doing the program across Canada for many years. So the problem was that a lot of Lutherans from the ELCIC didn't participate, or they just maybe they just didn't know about it. I don't know, but they are part of the Canadian Council of Churches. They are partners. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know about that as well. So, and I know that there have been different programs that they've been a part of. The ELCIC has been a part of. And so one last question, and you can answer in the chat. What is one hope, dream that you, for yourself or for the local church or synod, what is something that you would like to see happen? One hope or dream that you have.
And I would just invite you to like pop words or phrases or brief sentences into the chat as a way of responding to that question. What is one hope or dream you have for yourself, your congregation, or for your community?
Carmen, is there anything else that you wanted to say or address? Okay, then I think we're kind of wrapping up here. We will close with a prayer, but first of all, I do want to say a big thank you, Carmen. Thank you for being here and for leading us in this workshop. I have to say I'm really proud of our church for taking a step and actually committing time and resources to have a person that will help guide our church in a lot of these conversations. So I'm really happy that you're serving as an assistant to the bishop, and that you are able to share your time and your expertise and your experience with us. I do want to thank you for today, especially sharing your personal experience in not only work but also how racism has affected you in your life. Thank you for sharing your history, the history of slavery, especially in the Canadian context, which is something that we don't actually hear a lot about. So being able to put that, in our own context, for helping make clear the reality of racism and discrimination and exclusion in our own communities, the people of color experience on a daily basis. I want to thank you for opportunities for ongoing learning and sharing some of these workshops that are coming up, reminding us that including others is going to lead us to change and require us to change a lot of our long-held beliefs, and also leading us in this conversation and challenging us to move forward with this work and to, I think, as you said, to unlearn and relearn. And that's an important piece of who we are. So thank you for all of those things and for being here today. We so appreciate it and look forward to hearing more about the work that you do and for the resources that will be available through the website soon.